Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 211, by Hongzhen, I'm so silly, really. Su Hao understood balance. In order to make the mission seem more difficult and have an effect on training him, the instructor arranged for him to have 4, most ordinary team members. Without water element sprites, it also means that the battle power under the water is limited. Those who can't fly have to rely on rafts to cross the lake too. In comparison, if he formed a team with Lu Ren and the others. Lu Ren had the Sea Tide Frog King, Gu Linjiao's Tide Calling Spring Sprite and Fairy Snail, all of which were water element sprites of top quality. They could easily push the raft with unique skills like wave treading. Right, what about the lava dragon turtle? Lu Ren, who failed to cozy up to him, also thought of this question. Instructor, look, the lava dragon turtle is so heavy. Once it gets on the raft, the whole raft will fall apart, right? Instructor Ma glanced at it. Heavy sprites can't go onto the raft, but other sprites can't be left behind. Now, the timer starts. Student Su Hao, please assign us tasks. We will definitely do our best. A female student surnamed Lin from the same team mustered up her courage and said. Then, she quickly lowered her head, her face a little flushed. When the other boy saw this, he was envious and jealous, especially. He looked at student Lin frequently, but student Lin kept stealing glances at Su Hao. It was simply. But that was Big Boss Su, he was desperate orts. The seniors might not know Su Hao's name, but the freshmen had more or less heard of his legend. Su Hao easily obtained commanding rights. He looked towards the woods. The trees in the New World were very tall and of good quality. These trees could be used to make relatively large rafts with enough buoyancy. The only problem was the production craftsmanship. But the craftsmanship wasn't enough, so the sprites had to make up for it. Apart from Su Hao himself, the main sprites of the 4 teammates were respectively, Rainforest Giant Ape, Elephant General, Snowfield Sky Deer, and Sword Thorn Assassin. 3 earth elements and 1 ice element. So he found it troublesome. Apart from the Snowfield Sky Deer who could step on water, all other sprites needed to ride on the rafts. On the raft, not to mention fighting, even a slightly larger movement could break the raft. Your Rainforest Giant Ape and Elephant General are in charge of tying up the trees. Lin Jing, look for suitable vines with your Snowfield Sky Deer. Huang XX, your Sword Thorn Assassin and my Flaming Spirit Crow are in charge of chopping down the trees. The Sword Thorn Assassin was the final evolved form of the sprite ground hedgehog. It had a humanoid form, and the brown spikes on its back looked like long hair that extended from its head to its toes. Its claws fused, evolving into the form of a sword. It was a relatively rare agile assassin-type sprite among the earth element types. After the mission was assigned, the 5 people and over 10 sprites scattered into the woods. The raft production competition was in full swing. With the help of the sprites and the excellent materials obtained locally, the raft pieced together looked pretty well put together. Somewhere on the shore, a polar nine-tails was spitting out frost, freezing the head and tail of the raft and constantly strengthening it. On the side, a boy in white glanced into the distance from time to time. He was looking in Su Hao's direction. Battle intent burned in his eyes. He suffered defeat after defeat, but he, the man from the Bai family, would never give up. In the past, regardless of whether it was a head-on battle, mission battles, or assessment battles, I lost. But today, I will win. Bai Hongzhen wasn't being arrogant. He admitted that he was inferior to Su Hao. For the time being, the Polar Nine-Tails wasn't a match for Reverie Butterfly and Flaming Spirit Crow, but I have the geographical advantage today. In terms of geographical advantage, apart from his trump card, Polar Nine-Tails, the Sea Tide Frog King and Giant Cannon Lobster were both water element sprites. They had an advantage in battle in the lake environment. The teammates assigned to him by his instructor were stronger than Su Hao's teammates. With such a huge advantage, Bai Hongzhen felt that, he couldn't lose any more. An hour later. Time's up. The teams that have finished making the raft can start crossing the lake. Heavenly King Wu's voice spread far and wide, reaching everyone's ears. Whoosh! Wooden rafts were pushed into the water by the sprites, causing countless splashes. Let's set off too. Let your sprites try not to move. Su Hao said to the two male students. After their rainforest giant ape and elephant general carefully boarded the raft, they shrunk into a ball. It was the same for Su Hao's electric bear. It looked very aggrieved. Among the others, the sword thorn assassin or the initial stage evolved sprites, after those who were not big, who couldn't fly or swim boarded the raft, it wasn't too crowded either. Su Hao stood in front of the raft and threw out a vine, which was bitten by the water unicorn beast. Together with the snowfield sky deer, they started to drag the raft forward. The raft swept across the lake, and circles of ripples spread out, starting to advance towards the thousand-peak island at the end of their vision. Soon, the raft Su Hao was on, was pulled a long distance away. He saw that under the control of the water element sprite, the entire raft which Gu Linjiao was on, had suddenly rushed out into the distance as if it had a propeller. 2 wooden stakes were nailed to the back of the raft that Li Songting was on. His master hound burst into muscle form and pressed down on the wooden stakes with both hands. Its legs kept shaking as it stepped on the water surface and pushed forward with all its might. The water surface exploded with countless waves, but the raft also rushed forward rapidly. In comparison, the water unicorn beast didn't have enough water. It wasn't strong enough either. There was no need to mention the snowfield sky deer. Should he add flaming spirit crow to pull the boat? Su Hao sank into deep thought. Whoosh! The lake breeze blew. Bai Hongzhen stood in front of the raft and looked around. Around him, several rafts advanced side by side with him, they were the first tier. But there was no raft where Su Hao was. He looked back and searched for a long time. Su Hao, you disappointed me too much. Since Bai Hongzhen couldn't find Su Hao, he stopped searching and said to the Sea-Tide Frog King and the other sprites who were working hard under the raft, "Come on. Work hard. We want to get first place today." Heavenly King Wu stood in midair and looked down at the lake. Behind him was a trading puppet. Its psychic power was supporting him, not leaving any traces. Almost. Heavenly King Wu saw that the first tier had already crossed half the distance. He said to the other instructors, "It's time to increase the difficulty for them." The instructors nodded and revealed their smiles. The water element horse instructor rode a cloud water dragon horse and flew through the air, scattering some invisible powder that had no smell. It was a seducing powder specially developed for the water element sprites of Dragon Court Lake. The powder scattered. On the lake, some students' water element sprites seemed to have smelled something delicious, but the next moment, the smell disappeared again. They were stunned for a moment before continuing to act as coolies. At this moment, whoosh! Water streams exploded on the lake surface. Brownish-red colored sprites with whiskers on their heads, and armed with harpoon weapons leaped out of the lake bed. Sprite, lobster soldier. It was one of the commonly seen sprites in the Dragon Court Lake area. Why are there suddenly so many wild sprites? Some students panicked. Their sprites fought hard to repel the lobster soldiers that kept coming out. They are clearly just entry-level sprites. Why is it like they are injected with hormones? Even the elite level pressure can't scare them away. Some people thought to themselves. Suddenly, kaka! A pair of big pincers emerged from the bottom of the water, cutting a huge hole in the middle of the raft, which was more than 10 meters long. The students on the raft panicked. The next moment, boom! A huge water stream exploded, directly breaking the raft into two. In the waves, a human-shaped sprite about 2 to 3 meters tall and 2 to 3 meters wide appeared. It was also brownish-red and had a pair of pincers. It's Crab General. Elite crab generals appeared one after another, stirring up waves. Water pillars exploded, and water droplets fell like rain. In an instant, there were many cases of rafts destroying people and sinking them. Some students could save themselves by letting their flying sprite pick them up and fly back to the shore dejectedly. Some couldn't save themselves, so a wave of psychic power enveloped them and threw them back. The raft of Su Hao's team was at the back. But it was still targeted by wild sprites. Whoosh! A crab general leaped out from the bottom of the lake, its big pincers flashed, and it smashed towards the snowfield sky deer, which was pulling the raft. When the patrolling soldier Flaming Spirit Crow in the sky saw that something was wrong, it immediately made a squawk sound and suddenly turned into a line of fire, flashing straight down. With a whoosh, clear cracks appeared on Crab General's crab shell. Not even half a second after it appeared, it fell back with a bang. Steady, don't panic, it's not a big problem. Su Hao told the sprites on the raft not to move, and then let the water unicorn beast sink under the raft to defend. He touched his chin and started thinking. Their speed was already very slow to begin with. With the interference of the Dragon Court Lake sprites, they reckoned that they would fall into the last 20 teams. This couldn't go on. Su Hao looked ahead. Water pillars exploded, waves surged, and rafts fell apart in the battle. There was even a raft that was swallowed by a giant leviathan that suddenly emerged from the bottom of the water. They had escaped death by a hair. Wait, giant leviathan? As the evolved form of Salted Fish King, once it evolved, it basically had elite-level strength. Its development potential was pretty good. It was just that nurturing the Salted Fish King to meet the evolution conditions was extremely difficult. But there was no need to doubt the giant leviathan's battle power, and it also had a huge body. Once it appeared, it brought great pressure to the students. A leviathan alone had destroyed several rafts in a few minutes. The other teams in the surroundings had already gone all out, wanting to get away from this giant leviathan. Su Hao's eyes lit up. Butterfly. Gurgle. It understood tacitly, turned into a gust of wind, and flew up, landing on the giant leviathan's head in a moment. The orb circled around it and the illusion enveloped the sprite. In the end, it was just an elite-level wild giant leviathan. Butterfly's strength overwhelmed it. It spent a few minutes of friendly communication and magical persuasion with the giant leviathan, and finally, a giant leviathan broke through the waves and came over. It pointed right at where they were. On the raft, the other 4 people who didn't know the situation were nervous. They believed that Big Boss Su Hao had the ability to deal with the giant leviathan, but the giant leviathan could destroy their raft with a pounce. Wait, look, there are people on the giant leviathan. No, there are sprites. One of the boys in the team noticed the small figure on the giant leviathan with his sharp eyes. Only then did the others heave a sigh of relief. So the giant leviathan. It had an owner. That didn't seem right either. 10 minutes later. Gurgle, charge. Butterfly stood on the giant leviathan's head. The giant leviathan's tail was dragging a raft as it advanced at an extremely fast speed. Around the raft and under the water, there were also a few crab generals who were also convinced to act as guards. The lobster soldiers that emerged from time to time were beaten down by a pair of pincers. The occasionally appearing crab general was also beaten up by traitors like them. When there were too many of them, it would attract them to the surface of the lake and let the one-blade fire crow deal with them. Whoosh! Su Hao's luxurious team rode the wind and broke the waves. That huge island kept enlarging in his vision, showing straight, tall, and blade-like mountain peaks on the island. They were about to reach Thousand Peak Island. At the same time, under the interference of the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, only the last 3 rafts remaining were in the lead. Bai Hongzhen stood in front of the raft. He had already forgotten about Su Hao, but when he glanced at the 2 rafts that were level with them on both sides, his gaze was still solemn. Hurry, faster, he urged. The island was getting closer and closer, but none of the 3 rafts fell behind any other. They were all doing the final sprint. Suddenly, whoosh! A huge wave of water came from the side. Bai Hongzhen, who was standing at the front, swayed continuously with the raft and almost fell down. The water element sprite hurriedly stabilized the raft and stayed alert of its surroundings. After Bai Hongzhen barely stabilized himself, he looked to the front, on the right. Over there, waves were crashing. A giant leviathan was dragging the raft and sprinting rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of them. Only the splashes of water kept splashing towards them. On the raft. Su Hao, it's actually you. Bai Hongzhen's mouth opened slightly. Looking at the raft, and then at Reverie Butterfly standing on the top of the giant leviathan, he recalled the fear of a group of people being dominated by Reverie Butterfly during the challenge segment. He slapped himself forcefully. I'm so silly, really. Chapter 212, Training Alone. When the sky gradually darkened, the freshmen finally arrived at Thousand Peak Island on rafts. Many teams crossed twice, thrice before they finally successfully reached the shore under the circumstances that the instructors didn't continue sprinkling powder. The first day passed as they were lumbering, choosing camps, and building camps. These were all practical knowledge, and Su Hao listened very seriously. For instance, when facing different environments and different sprites, what kind of powder must be chosen to effectively drive wild sprites away? For example, how to differentiate whether a foreign land was the territory of a powerful sprite, etc. The instructors spoke wherever they went. Su Hao absorbed the information like a sponge. Occasionally, he heard the prompt of intelligence points. After that, on the second day, third day, and fourth day, Su Hao and the others were divided into 10 teams to learn from different instructors. Learn the real New World survival methods and learn how to find precious materials. On the fifth day, 10 teams and more than 1,000 students gathered again. Heavenly King Wu descended from the sky. After appearing in a flashy manner, he said, "After 4 days of learning, I believe you have already gained a preliminary understanding of the survival and exploration of the New World. Next, it will be the moment you look forward to the most. Free exploration segment. Not only that, as your first experience in the New World, all the materials you get for this round of exploration will not be taxed across borders." When Su Hao heard this, his eyes lit up together with butterfly. When he left the New World and returned to planet Aquamarine, if the items he brought with him exceeded 20 kilograms, or the total value exceeded 100,000, he would have to pay a border tax. The tax rate was very high, generally 50% of the item's value. It could also be sold to the buyers in the city at a lower price. Even so, 50% of the income was precious money for sprite trainers. Every year, many elite-level sprite trainers rushed to the New World. Many earned a lot, but some were buried in nameless areas. Compared to them, Su Hao had his own advantages. He had unparalleled eyesight. He was excited, so was everyone else. But very quickly, Heavenly King Wu poured cold water on them. You have to remember that this is the New World. The death rate of newbies like you, well, it's usually the highest. I hope that I can still see all of you when we go back. Free exploration did not have mandatory teams. After Heavenly King Wu finished speaking, the boys and girls who were interested chose to team up themselves. There were also many who chose to do it alone. After all, they were sprite trainers. Being alone was a team. Lu Ren didn't look for him, and Su Hao was happy to explore on his own. He was just thinking about where to start. At this moment, Heavenly King Wu walked over. Senior Wu. Heavenly King Wu glanced at Butterfly and the rest. The sprites are all cultivated pretty well. Are you interested in exploring more valuable areas? Su Hao expressed his doubts, and Heavenly King Wu continued. The 2 islands, Thousand Peak and Myriad Forest, have had many students exploring and training over the years. There isn't much value left to excavate anymore. In comparison, because of its unique environment, Mist Island still possesses relatively high excavation value and one can find many precious materials and treasures. Of course, the danger is also much higher than the Thousand Peak and Myriad Forest Island. Heavenly King Wu paused for a moment before continuing, however, Mist Island is in the Dragon Court Lake area after all. There are generally no strong wild sprites, so it's relatively safe. I'm suggesting that you go. On Thousand Peak Island, you won't get any effective training, but chicks still have to spread their wings and fly high in the end. Su Hao glanced at the interface, hesitated for half a second, and decided. Tisk. Just as Heavenly King Wu said, flowers can't grow in a greenhouse. Of course, it was impossible to risk his life. He could only work hard to nurture sprites so that he could give himself a sense of security. Whoosh! By taking the trading puppet special plane, Su Hao only took 20 minutes to travel from Thousand Peak Island to Mist Island, which was closer to the center of the lake. As far as the eye could see, there was a thin mist covering the island. It looked beautiful under the sunlight, like a fairyland. Heavenly King Wu reminded him one last time. Remember, apart from wild sprites, you have to be wary of the other explorers. When you are out, you have to always maintain a vigilant mindset. With that, he disappeared with a whoosh. Gurgle. Butterfly looked at him. Su Hao knew that the little rascal was already impatient, asking him if they could start. What? How many points are you asking? Your money is my money, is there a need to calculate so clearly? Gurgle, degree oh degree. Butterfly didn't want to speak and threw a dumb unicorn at him. Su Hao took the opportunity to ride the water unicorn beast. With his legs pressed against the horse's belly, the horse trotted into the woods. In the woods, the thin mist shrouded them, adding mystery to their surroundings. Occasionally, one could hear the cries of insects and see the figure of a certain sprite flashing in the distance. When Butterfly returned, it felt like it had returned home, as it flew around happily. It called out to the flaming spirit crow and searched around. That's worthless. That one is too dirty, don't pick it up. Su Hao looked ahead. On the light screen, there were some precious materials that could be fancied by the interface. But he inflated. Even if the interface fancied them, Su Hao had to be picky. Unfortunately, the interface map isn't wide enough. But even so, the interface was very useful. In particular, some very inconspicuous materials hidden in the cracks of the rocks and under the ground were similarly eye-catching in the interface. It's best if I can pick up a heart of attributes. It would be even more perfect if I could pick up 2 or 3. Su Hao thought that if he could pick up 2 fire element hearts of attributes and let the flaming spirit crow swallow them in one bite, it might be able to break through to extraordinary level with a pop. But just by looking at the environment of Mist Island, he also knew that if he wanted to pick up the fire element hearts of attributes here, it was undoubtedly. He saw peaches in Butterfly's eyes. Eat, sleep, pick up precious materials, hit sprites. A day passed in the blink of an eye, and night arrived. At night, Su Hao didn't continue exploring. Instead, he found a place to camp against the wind. He laid down the waterproof mat, leaned back against the electric bear's soft belly and rested. The flaming spirit crow rested on a tree branch more than 10 meters tall. It was silent, like an emotionless sentry. Butterfly's cell phone was plugged into the portable charger, but it was very troubled without the internet. Gurgle. It turned to look at Su Hao, and at the electric bear, and asked, "Are we playing cards?" The human and bear shook their heads continuously. The horse and crow also shook their heads right after. Gurgle disappointed, Butterfly opened the notepad and started composing tutorials. It felt that opening classes was more profitable. Su Hao played with his cell phone for a while and continued to stare at the interface. He could still see a lot of precious materials around him. Well, I'll find the one with the highest value first and note down the location. I'll go and get it tomorrow morning. If there's the heart of attributes, that's another story. He dragged the map to the far end and discovered a group of final evolved sprites huddled together. Sprites from different races. Su Hao opened it and took a look. 15 elite levels. From the information here, they belong to 5 sprite trainers. That should be an exploration team. It was very common for sprite trainers to team up for field exploration, but Su Hao saw that among those sprites, 3 were actually at the limit of elite level, 1 was especially strong, and the rest were mostly at the mid-level elite level. For an exploration team, it was a very luxurious arrangement. As for Mist Island, even if the danger level is slightly higher than the other 2 islands, it's still considered a beginner's area. Why is a luxurious team here? Su Hao couldn't tell if it was a seniors team or an external team. But he had no intention of approaching. It was safer to be alone in the wild. At a camp 2 to 3 kilometers away from Su Hao, the bonfire burned and crackled. There were 3 men and 2 women sitting around the bonfire. All of them were in their 30s. They were wearing worn battle clothes, and their expressions weren't very energetic. They were tired after living in the wild for more than half a month, especially since they had never found their target. Did you really see many light element sprites? The muscular bald man looked at the thin young man with a dark expression. I swear, it's true. The thin and weak young man hurriedly raised his hand. At that time, I was being chased by a few death locusts. When I was fleeing in a panic, I suddenly saw a place shrouded in dazzling holy light. I was worried that there were powerful sprites inside, so I didn't dare to run in. Give me time, I'll definitely be able to find it. You better not be lying. The bald man snorted and said, if we find a rare light element sprite, both of us can get rich, but if you're lying. He twisted his neck, making cracking sounds. Chapter 213, Land of Light. The next day, early in the morning, Su Hao woke up from the electric bear's soft belly pillow. He took out the foldable basin and let the dumb unicorn gather the water vapor in the air for him to brush his teeth and wash his face. Instantly, he became much more awake. Let's eat. Su Hao took out jade powder set meals of various attributes that he had long concocted from his backpack and arranged them one by one. The electric bear, which was lying on its back on the tide-resistant cushion, moved its ears. The whole big fat bear suddenly sat up straight. It turned its head and stared straight at the thunder element jade powder set meal. Its mouth seemed to be already drooling. Howl! Seeing Su Hao nod, it picked up the jade powder set meal and finished it in 3 to 5 bites. It was full, but it wasn't satisfied. It hugged the box and continued to lick. After licking it, he ate some snacks that weren't very filling. Su Hao also started preparing for his breakfast. He borrowed some fire from the flaming spirit crow, boiled water, and cooked noodles. A moment later, a bowl of steaming hot noodles was ready. Slurp slurp slurp. After eating and drinking his fill, Su Hao patted his stomach in satisfaction and looked around. The light of dawn appeared, and the sky gradually brightened. Su Hao flipped over and rode on the dumb unicorn. A big white bear led the way in front, while Butterfly and Flaming Spirit Crow danced low in the air. The second day of the treasure hunt began. It's only worth 3 credits, and it occupies space. I don't want this. Seeing Su Hao say this, Butterfly reluctantly threw away the black mineral ore in its hand, and buried it in the ground. Although it didn't want it anymore, it had to hide it well so that its heart wouldn't ache too much. Gurgle. This? It seems to be worth 8 credits. It's all right, put it in the backpack. Gurgle. It put it in, satisfied. The exploration process wasn't all smooth. Wild sprites often waited beside some high-value materials to guard them. Su Hao wasn't afraid of a few ordinary elite level ones, but if it were a few elite level limit ones, he would have to think twice. It wasn't that they couldn't fight, but the risks and benefits weren't proportional. In the wild, battles that can be avoided must be avoided as much as possible. The condition of the sprite itself must also be maintained above the standard. The supplies in the wild were limited. Once a sprite was injured, even if it could be treated with medicine, it would still take time. During this period, the battle power of the sprites dropped. Once they encountered a strong enemy, the danger increased a little. Unless there was a healing sprite skilled in full recovery. While Su Hao was thinking, suddenly, a few death locusts flew towards him. From the looks of it, they weren't weak either, directly targeting them. Plan 1, he said. In an instant. Bang! Flaming Spirit Crow activated Flaming Feather form. Its feather blade kept lengthening as its figure flashed and slashed towards a death locust. Fire Crow 1 blade slash. It erupted with full force. One could only see a fiery red figure flash past. The death locust, which was about half a meter long, fell from the sky. The other death locusts saw that the situation wasn't good. They grabbed that companion, flapped their wings, entered the forest and disappeared. The buzzing sounds faded into the distance. The flaming spirit crow also retracted the flames around it. Su Hao said, "Let's leave quickly." The commotion just now could have attracted the attention of many sprites. He didn't know what level of sprites on the island were, but safety was the priority. In particular, they couldn't let the stupid crow get too excited. If it died, the battle power of Su Hao's team would also drop a lot. Thud. 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 The water unicorn beast ran through the forest. Sunlight shone through the treetops, casting mottled shadows. "Stop!" Su Hao suddenly said, "Go back, go back." Dumb unicorn didn't understand, but it still walked back obediently. Su Hao spoke again and pointed in a certain direction. North, towards the north. As he moved, the nearby map displayed on the interface also moved. A moment later, Su Hao finally found what had passed by in a flash. A bunch of sprites again? Could it be another team of explorers? Wait, those sprites are... Su Hao opened one of the icons. A sprite that looked like a spiritual body with a glow on its body appeared. Morning Light Spirit. Pure Light Element Sprite. Then, he looked at those sprites pushing and pushing. They were either Light Element, Wood Element, or Lightning Element. When did Light Element sprites become so common? He knew that the conditions for the birth of Light Element sprites were very harsh. Any type of Light Element sprite was a rare sprite. Those that evolved from Wood Element and Thunder Element usually had very high evolution conditions too. There must be some special reason for so many Light Element sprites to be born. Su Hao's eyes widened as he searched the interface continuously. Finally, he discovered some other icons covered by the sprite icon. It's Light Elemental Crystal, there's more than one. In the illustrated book of precious treasures, the value of a fist-sized elemental crystal was equivalent to the heart of attributes. It was a precious treasure. Wearing elemental crystals for a long time could subtly improve a sprite's potential and various qualities. Some sprites also needed to absorb a small number of elemental crystals during their final evolution or advanced evolution. When he saw those icons, Su Hao knew that he had to go. Once he said that, Butterfly had already turned into the shape of money. Calm down, calm down. That's clearly the nest of Light Element sprites. It's hard to say if we can get Light Element crystals. If the danger is too great, we have to give up. In any case, let's investigate first. Su Hao set off. The sprites lowered their voices and lightened their footsteps. After walking for a long time, the mist gradually became thicker. It was so hazy that even the sunlight couldn't penetrate it. Everything was silent. Suddenly, a steep mountain wall appeared in front of them. There's no other way. The interface map could only show the icon, but not the specific environment and terrain. Su Hao's team could only explore the two sides. After walking for a long time, he circled around to the north from the south of the Light Element sprites. But Su Hao didn't see any traces of Light Element sprites. He wasn't able to get close. Su Hao stared at the interface map. After going around for a while, he finally discovered a gap under a rock wall. After crawling in, he took another few hundred steps forward. After turning around a corner, his vision suddenly became clear. The piercing light almost blinded Su Hao's eyes. That's... In front of his eyes, it looked like a completely sealed valley, surrounded by tall and steep rock walls. Logically speaking, the light should be very dim. However, on top of the valley, about dozens of meters high, there was an object emitting blazing white and bright light, like a sun. It was dazzling and eye-catching. Birds, entirely white and emitting soft white light, flew around the light ball, making coo sounds from time to time. Spirit pigeon, light spirit bird, holy spirit bird. Those were sprites of the same pathway. Su Hao looked at it again. He saw a human-like Saint Mantis warrior holding two light swords. He saw the moonlight rabbit, whose whole body was like jade, jumping around on the ground. He saw the light-wishing butterfly flapping its butterfly wings and scattering light. He saw the seven-colored deer dragging colorful light ribbons behind itself. He saw the double-element wood light demon, holding a bunch of grass in its hand. The top of the grass glowed like light bulbs. He also saw balls of light floating at low altitude, the numerous morning light spirits, and the evolved form of the morning light spirit, Holy Brilliance Spirit. They had humanoid bodies. There was no covering on the surface of their bodies, as if they were naked. Countless crooked patterns covered their bodies, and behind them were pairs of light wings that looked like glass lenses. Dazzling light blossomed from their bodies. Su Hao and Butterfly hid behind a huge rock, only showing their heads as they observed quietly. The strongest in this valley should be those holy brilliance spirits. Seeing with his own eyes, he compared it against the interface. More detailed data appeared. Su Hao found it tricky. At the same time, not far from Su Hao was another gap in the Radiant Valley. Outside the gap, the thin young man looked at his surroundings and suddenly exclaimed, "There! I saw holy light there!" Chapter 214, Electric Bear's Hardcore Grappling Monster. In the Land of Light, Su Hao hid behind the rock wall. The slightly larger ones like the Electric Bear, Flaming Spirit Crow and the Dumb Unicorn were all pushed back by him, making them stay obediently behind the corner. The ball of light can evolve into a daylight spirit before evolving into a holy brilliance spirit. Due to the unique characteristics of light element sprites, a holy brilliance spirit is good at enhancement and recovery, and its battle power is also pretty good. And the second pathway of the ball of light can evolve into a twilight spirit, which is also a light element type. However, its final form is reversed, turning into a dark element sprite, good at giving poison milk to the enemy. In the valley, Su Hao didn't see twilight spirit. It was due to the environment. Many evolved and second stage evolved sprites in the Land of Light were also able to evolve because they stayed near light elemental crystals for a long time. Su Hao was a little envious of Holy Brilliance Spirit's high growth potential. Originally, he didn't have any plans to contract a sprite, but plans were always ruined by accidents. Common sprites such as ginseng babies and clear jade lotuses also have healing abilities, but they aren't pure enough. To put it simply, they lack milk content. The clear jade lotus's unique characteristic was that it could cast barriers to protect itself, but its recovery ability was basically zero. As for the ginseng baby, it had a unique race characteristic. Its ginseng roots could be separated, and one bite would make it 100 times more energetic. Its recovery ability wasn't weak, but its endurance was too weak. And its battle power was weak. The other sprites in the valley, Light-Wishing Butterfly and Moonlight Rabbit, can also be considered. The final evolved form of the Moonlight Rabbit is Moon Fairy, a human-shaped sprite. Her looks aren't bad. As for the final form of the Light-Wishing Butterfly, it has yet to be developed, but according to speculation, it may also be a humanoid with good looks. Su Hao felt that it was. Gurgle. Butterfly felt that it couldn't. They were probably mutually exclusive. Just as Su Hao was thinking. It's really a light element sprite. The bald man became excited. So many light element sprites, we are rich. On the market, any light element sprite can be sold for an extremely high price. Besides, there are many sprites in their initial forms here. The initial form was even more valuable than the evolved form. The younger they were, the more valuable they were. That meant that it might be contracted. Wait, Captain, that's... A young man looked up and exclaimed, then covered his mouth abruptly. The bald man also looked up and saw the dazzling sun. He suddenly cursed. It's a light elemental crystal, it has to be as big as a basketball, no, a bucket. That's worth. It's worth it. No, it's not something that can be compared with money anymore. His eyes burned. But the next moment, he heard a sharp cry. The group of light element sprites discovered them and pounced over. Kill them! The bald man twisted his neck and laughed sinisterly. Light element sprites were no longer important, as long as they could get that huge light element crystal. Bang! The bald man's great titan punched out, sending a fluorescent demon flying. It twisted its body and kicked out explosively. A sacred mantis warrior was also kicked into the rock wall, leaving behind a human-shaped pit. There were many sprites in the Land of Light, but only a small portion of them were elite level. Their individual battle power was even less than those experienced elites of the exploration team who had mastered many unique skills and profound meanings. In a moment, they were forced back. Suddenly, a beam of light swept across from top to bottom, triggering waves of explosions wherever it passed. A few holy brilliance spirits joined the battle, and the scene became even more chaotic. Boom! The bald man commanded the sprites. His sharp eyes swept the surroundings, and he was suddenly stunned. There's someone there. He saw a huge rock being affected and destroyed. In the smoke and dust, a figure retreated. Someone is hiding there, we can't let him leave. He immediately gave the order. The other sprite, the rainforest giant ape, pressed its palms together, gathered a huge energy ball, and threw it out forcefully. F***ck, a type of plant. Su Hao cursed silently. The huge energy ball hit Butterfly's psychic shield, causing it to shake continuously before finally breaking apart. The giant rainforest ape also rushed over. That's a student from Whale Island University. Captain, are you crazy? I'm not crazy. If he leaves and the news gets out, do you think we can take that huge light element crystal away? Captain is right. That thing can even cause a master level craze. If the news gets leaked, our lives will be in danger. Isn't he just a student? Nobody will know if he dies here. They were all staring at the huge crystal, only using their peripheral vision to observe the situation on the right. The team leader's rainforest giant ape was at the limit of elite level, and with the assistance of 2 other elite levels, it should be enough to deal with one student. As they were thinking, they suddenly widened their eyes and saw countless lightning bolts bloom and suddenly wrap around their sprites. The 3 sprites, the rainforest giant ape, the elephant general, and the ground wolf, pounced over. They were all common sprites, but they were battle-hardened and had good battle power. Even when they saw the powerful flaming spirit crow rush out, they didn't hesitate. They raised smoke and dust to block themselves, and then, continued to charge towards Su Hao. Attack the sprite trainer. It was their battle instinct. They wouldn't fight by the rules like the sprites sent by the school. Boom! Butterfly flew in front of Su Hao. It threw out an energy ball and created a psychic shield to protect them. The flaming spirit crow rushed out of the smoke and dust and pounced on the ground wolf, but the other 2 sprites continued forward without any hesitation, already approaching Su Hao. Right at this moment, howl! A big white bear rushed out from the side and mocked them. However, Elephant General and the rainforest giant ape paid no attention to it. Their speed even increased by a bit. The electric bear mocked again. Howl! At the same time, its body released lightning. Lightning arcs turned into chains and shot out, wrapping around Elephant General and the rainforest giant ape. Then, it pulled back forcefully. Hardcore pull! Come on! Fight me head-on! The electric bear let out a roar and rolled around with Elephant General and his two sprites. Su Hao also took the opportunity to flip onto the water unicorn beast that was running over. I finally feel safe. Flames of anger erupted from the flaming spirit crow and the three sprites. Bang, 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 bang. Before long, the two sprites fell. Only the elite-level Great Rainforest Giant Ape was still struggling bitterly. The bald man's expression darkened. He's a tough nut to crack. But he was also decisive. All of you hold on. When I snatch that light element crystal, we'll leave immediately. As he spoke, he grabbed his forest griffin and flew into the sky. With its superb and exquisite flying skills, the forest griffin kept flipping and moving in the air, avoiding many flying light rays and energy balls, and gradually approached the dazzling light ball. What are you doing here? He saw the thin young man approaching on a flying sprite. Let me help you. Help me resist the surrounding firepower. My sandstorm giant eagle is fast, it's easier for me to get it. My wind-chasing horse is fast, let me do it, you guys cover. The few of them chased after one another. Finally, the sandstorm giant eagle was a little faster, its claws grabbing at the huge crystal. At this moment, white light erupted, and a holy brilliance spirit with even more demonic patterns on its body appeared in front of the sandstorm giant eagle. A pair of glowing arms pierced right through the sandstorm giant eagle. Countless light beams burst out and hit the thin young man like raindrops. Its protective barrier only lasted for a few seconds before cracking. The man and the eagle fell from the sky. The bald man and the others looked shocked. They didn't even need to use their eyes to know that the holy brilliance spirit in front of them was extraordinary. Chapter 215, The Third Evolution Pathway of the Light Ball. In front of the huge white ball of light, a holy brilliance spirit stood there. Its body emitted a piercing light, making it difficult to look at. It stood in the air like a king. Every move it made brought indescribable pressure to the bald man and the others. The bald man looked at the thin young man whose life and death was unknown, then stared at the huge light elemental crystal. There was heat and struggle in his eyes, but after an instant, he restrained his greed and patted the forest griffin under him. Retreat! The forest griffin roared, flapped its brown wings, and flew towards a relatively wide gap below. But when the other sprite trainer riding the wind-chasing horse saw the holy brilliance spirit king turn into light and chase after the bald man, he gritted his teeth and made the wind-chasing horse pounce towards the huge crystal. Nay! The wind-chasing horse approached in a few breaths. On the horse's back, the man shook his tactical backpack. After shaking out everything inside, he suddenly aggressively pounced towards the huge crystal. His expression gradually became ecstatic, but the joy only lasted for less than half an instant. On the huge light elemental crystal, an even more dazzling light blossomed. The high temperature produced by the light burned the entire tactical backpack. A protective light shield also appeared on the man's body, with circles of ripples continuously appearing on it. His wind-chasing horse was also burnt, there were some charred marks on its white wings. At this moment, the angry holy brilliance spirit king charged back. Its palms were pressed together, and a dazzling, blazing white sun appeared. The whole valley seemed to be left with only a vast expanse of white. After a while, the surroundings of the light elemental crystal had already been cleared. The holy brilliance spirit king's chest heaved as it took a breath. Then, it flew out with a swoosh and chased after the other intruders. In the land of light, a group of light balls hid in a corner, bouncing up and down. A few spiritual pigeons made cooing sounds as they flew around. Explosions and shouts sounded out continuously. Smoke and dust filled the air. No one noticed that a figure was quietly approaching. Su Hao glanced at the map. After confirming that there were no powerful hidden sprites. "Tisket," he said, and added, "Control your strength." Gurgle. Butterfly threw out a few energy balls and exploded with a boom. On the surface of the huge light elemental crystal, the power set up by the Holy Brilliance Spirit King erupted again. It was dazzling. But that power was just water without any source. After Butterfly blasted more than 10 times, it used its psychic power to probe and offset the final power. Gurgle. It succeeded. Su Hao approached on the dumb unicorn, put it in the tactical backpack, and carried it away directly. It was a little hot. The protective screen had already appeared. But it wasn't strong, and the consumption of soul power was slow. Retreat. A horse, a man, and a butterfly quickly flew upwards towards the entrance of the valley. Holy Brilliance Spirit King returned through the gap below. At this point, the battle in the valley had already become much quieter. The light element sprites had completely gained the upper hand. The sprites of the exploration team were either dead or summoned outside. The extraordinary level Holy Brilliance Spirit waved its hand and swept up a gust of wind, dispersing the surrounding smoke and dust. Like a king, it patrolled its territory, especially that most important treasure. It was suddenly stunned. "Where's my huge, light elemental crystal?" The Holy Brilliance Spirit King was stunned and angry. The patterns on its body glowed with a piercing light as waves of pressure spread out, its gaze quickly sweeping the surroundings. It saw the distant figure above the valley. It rushed up. After flying out of the entrance at the top of the mountain, which wasn't very wide, Su Hao instructed the water unicorn beast to descend. But before he landed on the ground, he heard a sharp, angry howl. A blazing white shadow streaked across the air, enlarging in his vision with a whoosh. Running unicorn could not outrun the Holy Brilliance Spirit King. Su Hao had expected this. Holy Brilliance Spirit was a sprite that was good at speed to begin with. Its speed in a straight line sprint was one of the best among its peers, let alone an extraordinary level 1. When he made the move, he already considered the possibility of being caught up. It had also repeatedly researched the battle power of the Holy Brilliance Spirit King. "Flaming Spirit Crow!" he shouted in the contract. The Flaming Spirit Crow, which had long been waiting outside the valley, let out a sharp cry. Squawk! Rolling flames burned. In the thick mist, a dazzling red sun suddenly rose. Amidst the scorching sun, a crescent-shaped, crimson sword light more than 10 meters long was slashed out. The Flaming Spirit Crow that had been accumulating power for a long time erupted with full force. The hot flames evaporated the air, and the dense fog became much thinner. The sword beam flashed past in an instant and appeared in front of the Holy Brilliance Spirit King. It clearly sensed the danger. Its wings of light straightened as it reached forward with both hands and twisted abruptly. Its piercing gaze formed circles of light that collided with the flaming blade light. Boom! Flames erupted and light was dazzling. Shock waves swept across the surroundings. The blazing white light rushed out from it. It raised its hand and shot out countless resplendent beams of light, directly towards the scarlet blazing sun. Flaming Spirit Crow is injured. Su Hao looked back. White and red lights interweaved in the air continuously. Thunder appeared from time to time, and emerald green energy balls exploded. Without looking much, he hugged the water unicorn beast's neck tightly, lowered his body, and followed the water unicorn beast to the ground before entering the forest. Holy Brilliance Spirit is good at sprinting in a straight line. To the left. Run towards the complicated terrain, he said. Behind them, the Holy Brilliance Spirit King was chasing after them, ignoring the entanglement of the 3 sprites. From time to time, Su Hao saw light beams shooting over and landing not far from him. Some pierced through huge trees that needed several people to wrap their arms around, while others exploded. He rode the water unicorn beast and kept running, running. Gradually, there was no more movement behind him. Su Hao opened the interface map and quickly scanned it. There was no icon of the Holy Brilliance Spirit. He heaved a sigh of relief and immediately spread his fingers. 1 and 2 engraved marks appeared. Butterfly appeared. Next was the electric bear. Finally, a fire crow with countless light and heat emitting from its body appeared. As soon as it appeared, it hurriedly converged the surrounding flames and removed its sun form. Among the 3 sprites, the flaming spirit crow was the main battle force. It had been constantly entangled with the Holy Brilliance Spirit King, and it looked the most miserable. A lot of its dark red feathers had fallen, and there were also many wounds torn by fine light in front of it. But it still raised its head and made a proud squawk. In other words, it had also injured the Holy Brilliance Spirit. Yes, you're the best. After thinking about it, Su Hao added, all of you are the best. He said to the other 3 sprites and continued to stare at the interface, not daring to relax. Butterfly used its psychic power to take out the healing spray. After briefly treating its injuries, Su Hao's team headed towards the direction outside the island. Along the way, Su Hao used the interface map to avoid some difficult wild sprites. After more than 100 minutes, they finally arrived at a cliff. He looked over. The blue lake was like a treasure, reflecting sparkles under the sun. I remember that Thousand Peak Island is at the east. But he couldn't see it, he could only vaguely see a few small islands. The distance between the 3 large islands was very far. Su Hao looked down at the worn-out tactical backpack and felt troubled. As the wind and waves blew, his heart also seemed to have cooled down. He got a little carried away snatching the huge light elemental crystal. The end result was good, but he still felt a little scared when he recalled the experience. He was also a little excited. But, how should I deal with such a big light elemental crystal? Its value might be equal to dozens or hundreds of hearts of attributes. If I bring it back to Whale State City, I can deal with it, but I'm afraid that I'll encounter trouble on the way. When he returned to the city, there was no law that did not allow snatching spoils of war. Besides, he had a backer. It was just that. The spoils of war were hundreds of millions in value. It could be sold, but it would also make others greedy. Besides, what if I encounter robbers on the way? Will such a big light elemental crystal be sensed and discovered by other sprites? It's also a problem. Bald head. He felt that bringing the light element crystal along was too risky. Unless... SOS. Senior Wu's figure appeared in Su Hao's mind. He trusted Senior Wu's character. He was also a Heavenly King level big boss. To him, a light elemental crystal shouldn't be much. The discovery of the Land of Light has very high contributions. In fact, I can't swallow it alone, nor can I handle it. It's best to submit it to the school. I can also share some benefits. Cut half of the light elemental crystal and give it to Senior Wu, then entrust it to Senior Wu to deal with it. Su Hao admitted that he was a very easily contented person, mainly because the light elemental crystal tempted him first. Cough, cough. He made a decision. He buried the tactical backpack containing the huge light elemental crystal deep underground and erased the traces. Butterfly raised its little hand and volunteered to stay behind to keep watch. All right, Su Hao said. I'll leave the electric bear behind too. You guys hide. As long as you can see the buried location. The Dragon Court Lake area was at least safe in the air. Su Hao rode the water unicorn beast and the flaming spirit crow danced around him. They arrived at Thousand Peak Island without any surprises or danger along the way. When they arrived, the dumb unicorn, which had flown for a long time, was already so tired that it kept sticking out its tongue. Nay. Su Hao found the instructor who stayed behind in the camp and contacted Heavenly King Wu. He explained the situation. It's a small matter. Isn't it just an elemental crystal? It's still an elemental crystal even if it's a little bigger. Heavenly King Wu said. The trading puppet took off again. 20 minutes later, Su Hao and Heavenly King Wu arrived at Mist Island. After finding the place where the backpack was buried, the powerful psychic power of the trading puppet transformed into an excavator cover and instantly, countless soil flew everywhere. Before long, a tattered tactical backpack was grabbed by psychic power. Wisps of light pierced out of the hole in the backpack. From the looks of it, it's indeed a very big elemental crystal. Your luck is pretty good, just a little worse than when I first left for the wild back then. Heavenly King Wu swept his hair and revealed a look of reminiscence. However, he didn't notice that the trading puppet's eyes had already turned into underscore. At this moment, the backpack was lifted, and Psychic grabbed the light elemental crystal, pulling it out bit by bit. Heavenly King Wu was still recalling. Back then, but... He felt that his eyes were shaking a little uncomfortably. When he looked up, his eyes were about to pop out. What the f***ck? Heavenly King Wu couldn't help but turn and ask, "You said that the slightly big light element crystal, is this one?" Su Hao nodded. "Do you know that ordinary elemental crystals are only the size of a fist?" Su Hao nodded. "Then, can't you use a better adjective?" Su Hao looked innocent. Was he not clear enough? It seemed, not clear enough. Well, it wasn't a big problem. Such a big one, with only a weak extraordinary level guardian. Heavenly King Wu was envious. He had to admit that Su Hao's luck was a little better than his. If not for the fact that I don't have a light element sprite, I would be tempted by such a big one. Is it that, precious? You don't understand. When the size of an elemental crystal exceeds a certain limit, its value increases tenfold or even 100-fold. Let's put it this way. For example, the one in front of me, letting a suitable light-type pseudo-monarch sprite absorb it, has a high chance of breaking through to monarch rank and giving birth to a heavenly king-level sprite trainer. Once Senior Wu said that, Su Hao immediately took a deep breath. He immediately said, "Senior, please help me sell it. I only need half. I'm also preparing to hand over the Land of Light to the school." When Heavenly King Wu heard this, his expression was displeased. "I, your senior, am a dignified Heavenly King. There's no need for me to ask for so little from you." He snorted. "You don't need me to sell it for you. Just sell it to the school. It's easy for the school to take such an elemental crystal. You can also exchange it for many cultivation resources. Of course, such a big one can no longer be measured in value. It's more disadvantageous to sell it directly." But Su Hao understood. If he didn't sell it, he wouldn't be able to bring out the full effect of the big light ball either. It would be wasted in his hands. He might as well exchange it for the resources he needed. "Let's go to the Land of Light and take a look," Heavenly King Wu said. "Light element sprites are also very precious. You don't even need to worry about the 4 years of cultivation spent during this exploration. It's enough for you to nurture 2 to 3 extraordinary level sprites." As he spoke, psychic power enveloped him. Trading Puppet carried everyone's sprites and flew at a low altitude on the island. Dense fog and limited vision made exploring extremely inconvenient. It was also the reason why Mist Island had the most precious materials. Trading Puppet flew continuously for about an hour or two before Su Hao suddenly shouted, "Stop!" He wasn't pretending to be difficult to find. It was indeed hard to find. He saw that the cute light element sprite icon finally appeared on the interface, before confirming its location. Su Hao looked straight ahead, pretending to observe his surroundings. After a moment. To the left. On the upper left. To the right, a little to the right. Straight ahead. Fly higher, I see it, it's there. Amidst the thick mist, an ordinary-looking mountain appeared in his vision. If Su Hao hadn't said so, Heavenly King Wu wouldn't have imagined that there was a universe in the mountain peak. It flew in from the opening at the top of the mountain. At this moment, without the huge light elemental crystal, the whole Land of Light had already become much dimmer, but there were still other much smaller light elemental crystals emitting light. The moment the two of them and a few sprites appeared, they attracted the attention of the sprites in the valley. The Holy Brilliance Spirit King saw that person. That crow. That treasure. Its eyes immediately turned red. It pounced over with a sharp howl. It suddenly stopped in mid-air. Su Hao saw thin threads fly out of the trading puppet's hand. The extraordinary level Holy Brilliance Spirit immediately couldn't move. The power of a monarch was as strong as. The two slowly landed. The other light element sprites in the surroundings trembled under the pressure of the monarch level sprite. There has to be more than 100 light element sprites. Moreover, this place itself is somewhat special. Even without the huge light element crystal, sprites can still be born in the future. It's very valuable. You've contributed a lot. Heavenly King Wu took a look and made a judgment. Su Hao looked at the sprites around him, thought for a moment, and asked, "How do you usually handle these sprites?" Heavenly King Wu, according to their strength, they will be sent to different watch areas. There will be specialists to educate them. The batch that can be contracted will have priority in being contracted. Those that can't be contracted will be provided to various large laboratories. The Union's claim to the outside world was for the harmonious development of humans and sprites, but in fact, humans naturally prioritized themselves. Because humans were the masters of the world. Without the laboratory's research on various sprites, there wouldn't be the glory of the Union of Sprite Trainers today. The Union also had regulations that gentle methods were necessary for research of sprites. What about that Holy Brilliance Spirit? The laboratory can't keep an eye on it, right? Heavenly King Wu glanced at it. Holy Brilliance Spirit was bound and struggled for a long time, but it couldn't move. It gradually quietened down. Honest.jpg. High-level sprites are all intelligent, but they are also innocent. Perhaps it is very angry right now, but as long as it is fed well and treated well, it isn't difficult to get it to cooperate with research obediently. Su Hao glanced at it and felt that physical intimidation was the key. He also mentioned to Heavenly King Wu that he wanted a few moonlight rabbits and light-wishing butterflies to fill the laboratory. I'll just give them some instructions. You still want to find a light element sprite to contract, right? Heavenly King Wu smiled and said, "Choose now? Or wait until after they're sent to the watch area for education? I want to give it a try now." Su Hao mainly wanted to find talented sprites and mark them. But he hadn't thought about whether he was a contracting light ball, a moonlight rabbit, or a fluorescent worm. Moonlight rabbit and fluorescent worms were the initial stages of moonlight rabbit and light-wishing butterfly. Su Hao clicked open the initial form sprites and carefully read their information. He even squatted in front of them to observe. That made a few light balls jump away in panic like frightened deers, hitting the rock wall with a bang. Like balls of dough being squeezed into a flat shape, they slid down again. Su Hao was suddenly stunned. He saw that under the evolution pathway of one of the light clusters, there were actually 3 types of pathways: 1, 2, 3. It's not bloodline evolution, but clearly, only a portion of light clusters possess the 3rd pathway. Su Hao judged that perhaps some light balls lost the possibility of evolution during the development process. So they were striked off by the interface. He looked over. Sprite, light ball. Evolutionary pathway. 1. Morning light spirit, light, holy brilliance spirit, light. 2. Twilight spirit, light, dark star spirit, dark. 3. A dark silhouette, unlock with 10 intelligence points, a dark silhouette, unlock conditions not met. Without hesitation, he directly used 1 intelligence point to unlock the brief description of the evolution form. Instantly, his eyes widened. Fill in the blank questions. Please answer. 3rd pathway of light ball, name of sprite form. First evolution, ___________, light/dark. Second evolution, underscore 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 underscore, light slash dark.